Welcome to Mom in Mind, a podcast about maternal mental health from conception, pregnancy, to birth and postpartum. Real stories from moms and family members who've made it from struggling to wellness, and interviews with experts and advocates who work for moms and families to get the help they need. We discuss very real struggles that can sometimes be hard to hear, but these are stories that need to be told so that moms and families can know that healing is possible. This podcast is meant to offer information and awareness and is not a replacement for treatment by a professional or professional training. Thank you for being with us today. Welcome back to Mom in Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On this episode, we're hearing from a couple who shares about their experience of loss, birth, loss again, and birth again. 2 rainbow babies, and the anxiety and depression that came after, as well as how they navigated all of this as a couple. In this powerful episode, NaKaisha Banks and Shane Banks share their story in hopes to increase awareness about loss and loss as a couple of color. This is the first time we've had a couple on the podcast to talk about their experience, and I'm just so happy to bring this to you because it really deepens our understanding of what happens within a couple. And although this is one couple's story, I think it's a great way for us to really be thinking about how the family is a system. And while, yes, we focus a lot on what's going on with mom, things are really affecting the partner as well, and the couple and the family. And they do just such a beautiful job kind of walking us through what happened for them. But I also believe just you can hear that because of the strength of their relationship and their kind of agreement to check in with each other, how they were able to pull through this. NaKaisha Banks is a woman, mother, wife, daughter, sister, aunt, friend. She loves her life purpose role as a social worker, in which she started her life coaching and therapy practice in 2008 under the name Duo Empowerment Services, which stands for Do Unto Others. She is a published author, releasing her first book in April 2018, titled The Birdcage. She is the mother of 2 beautiful girls and has been married to Shane for 12 years. They share a passion of serving in ministry together for the past 14 years, in which their faith is the foundation to their living, existence, and means to overcoming difficulties. Shane Banks is a man, father, husband, son, brother, and friend to many. He is also a minister, and they've been married for 12 years. Together, they have 2 awesome daughters, London and Germany. Shane enjoys fishing, sci-fi, and action-packed movies and lives a blessed life. I'm honored to have them both on today, so let's hear from NaKaisha and Shane. Welcome, NaKaisha and Shane. I'm so honored to have you both with us today.
Thank you so much for having us, Kat.
Yeah, I was just telling you guys just right now, I'm so excited for this and honored to have you both on here because this is the first time we've had a couple come on to talk about their experience together. I mean, on this podcast, I'm often talking about either the mother's experience or sometimes the father's experience, but really this is a family experience and you guys are bringing a really powerful and needed perspective to this conversation. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So I'm just going to have you guys talk about your experience and share your story. And I'd love to learn what you went through and how you got through it. So wherever you'd like to begin.
Okay, awesome. Well, again, Dr. Kat, I just want to say thank you. Shane and I often, I guess, kind of try to figure out where we start with this story. And we've told it, to various people kind of here and there. So we currently have 2 children, 2 daughters, London and Germany. London is the oldest and she's almost 8 and she reminds us of that daily. And Germany is 2. So Germany turned 2 in May. And we label both of our children as rainbow children, meaning that we had a loss prior to each of our daughters. I think that's kind of the first time that I've said that publicly.
Thank you.
Again, just because, it's, for whatever reason in our community, kind of a taboo topic that not a lot of women or couples, I guess, even talk about. But, one of the things that, we've obviously are here to talk about is kind of that whole healing process. And I think with sharing this topic on this platform with you, hopefully someone will benefit from, what we shared today. And so I guess we'll kind of start, with the first loss that we experienced prior to London was in 2009. And it was one of those things where we weren't the couple that was trying. We didn't say like, oh, we've got to be married for so many years. And then at this year, we've got to start trying. And hopefully by this time we'll get pregnant and have a baby. We had always kind of just said from the beginning, like, let's just live our life and see what happens. Our faith is very strong. And so we said, if that is what God ordains for our life, then we will most certainly go forth with that. And so when we found out that we were expecting, it was exciting and kind of still like, did this really just happen? Is this real? And, kind of going through some of the initial tests and different things like that. And I started to have some complications in which, my doctor said, well, some of that's normal, so just kind of keep an eye out. For those that have actually experienced a miscarriage, they would know kind of that terminology. And then probably around somewhere between maybe 9 to 11 weeks, we actually experienced the miscarriage for the first time. And I don't know, I'm not exactly sure how to explain what you go through, because emotionally, from my perspective as a woman, obviously just the physical change and the hormonal change, but then just me processing it for what I had been through physically was difficult. And I'll let Shane kind of share his perspective on that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I'm interested, Shane, absolutely in your perspective and what your experience was through kind of the whole process of kind of finding out about the pregnancy and up until the miscarriage and after that.
Yeah. When we found out, we both was excited. I was excited. It's the first time I'd ever been through this process and having a baby and pregnant. And so I was overjoyed by the news. So it was an exciting time. I was happy and, start planning and, all these ideas of babies coming and start preparing for the baby and preparing the house and all that stuff. So all those thoughts and conversations start to happen. So it was a really exciting time for both of us. So, and just going through that process and then hearing the news that, we lost the baby, it was tough, and being there. And I guess my main focus was just to make sure that I was there for my wife and be there for her to support her through this and to be as strong as I could be to support her in the loss of the baby. So that's my focus turned to her, just to be there.
Right. And thank you for bringing your experience and for bringing that perspective. I think from some stories that I've heard that this is kind of can be common for the partner, the husband, to really kind of turn their focus to make sure the wife or partner is doing okay, which is great and supportive and amazing. And then also kind of makes me wonder, well, at some point, like, where are your feelings? That kind of thing. Like, I think a lot of men do really just stay strong for their partners, which is awesome and amazing. And then I still wonder, well, how are you feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think from my perspective, obviously the first time we went through it, it was both of us going through it together. Like I said, we went through that experience twice. And so after the second miscarriage, it was definitely a different experience for me because I was just like, again, we weren't trying. And so when we found out that we were expecting, it was just kind of like, wow, here we are again, like this is exciting, and when we got to the point of, things were okay. And because I was labeled high risk, obviously, because I'd had a miscarriage prior And then with my daughter, we'd had some complications with her and that pregnancy and things. So the doctors were, kind of on me like white on rice. I was in the doctor's office getting labs twice a week. And it was a very tedious process. And things were looking very well. And then all of a sudden, they just weren't. And I think that was the most difficult. And for me to know that I was going to go through this experience again of, miscarrying, the emotion that you have, like part of me was angry, part of me was sad, part of me was frustrated, part of me just couldn't understand why it kind of felt like my body was fighting against me, right? That, I can't keep this child safe or there, which I'm sure a lot of women have experienced and thought. But it put us in a very different space to where, I think we just kind of separated in the sense of, I feel like Shane dealt with his stuff where he was, and I dealt with mine where I was.
Right.
And it was a difficult experience, more difficult than the first time.
Well, yeah, I can sort of imagine too that you've experienced a loss and that was very difficult. And you have one child who is, I'm assuming, doing fine, but there were complications in the pregnancy. And then now you have the second loss, but you have something to refer back to in terms of like the pain and the process of that. But then anticipating like, is it going to be the same? Or, just having that added pressure of already having a reference for this kind of pain, then anticipating it. And gosh, that's just like a lot to deal with at once. And then it sounds like you guys were kind of processing things in different ways at different times. Is that correct? And Shane, in terms of your experience?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because I think as men, we process things differently and we don't, quite show our emotions out publicly. So, I was hurt and I had pain and different things of that nature, but I didn't show it outwardly to her. And I think at some time she felt that I wasn't sad or hurt because I didn't show my emotions, but I did. And I was trying to stay strong for her, in that regard and not show it outwardly. And maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should have, showed my emotions more in front of her. But maybe that would have helped her deal with it a lot better. But I didn't know.
Right.
know?
Well, how can you know? I mean, it makes sense to me that, again, that you would want to be in a place where you stay strong. Really difficult thing is happening. That makes sense to me. And I'm sure, at the time, looking back on things, you can see things differently. But in the moment, you're not necessarily able to think through those things in the same way. Yeah. So if you can, it sounds like there was a bit of a disconnect, which I think happens with a lot of couples during these like difficult times. I'm curious about like your kind of each of your well-being and how this kind of played out for you, NaKaisha. First, how did this impact you? The loss and then feeling disconnected.
Yeah, I think for a minute, I just had to like catch my breath. And I mean, honestly, I just feel like we were really in different spaces and we had to work really, really hard to like communicate with one another. And it wasn't that we blamed each other or anything of that nature, but I think exactly what Shane said in situations like that, like when you don't communicate or there's an expectation with communication, right? That maybe I expected him to say certain things or do certain things. And, because I was just in such a heavy space,
right,
having gone through this again that, I don't even think I know even to this point what I needed from him. I just know that I didn't feel like, is he giving me what I need or what is it that I need? What is he feeling? Because again, like he said, he didn't necessarily outwardly communicate that, right? And so for me, maybe I felt a little abandoned or, just alone. But, I think after, maybe a month or so, we got to a space where we were able to just sit down and process what just happened.
Right.
Where do we go from here? What does this actually look like for us so that we could get back on track, because in the heart of all of that, we still had this kid who had to be raised, right?
Yeah.
So it was a difficult time. I mean, it was a really, really difficult time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Shane, how about you? What did that feel like for you?
Well, as I start to open up and realize that she needed more communication from me and for me to, tell her more about how I felt. And, as we talked it out now, then I understood, that I, express myself more, talk more. As men, we just tend to shut down and keep quiet. But in the marriage and during these tough times, you have to take that hardness and that rough, tough, manly face off, and open up. So I felt a lot better after that.
Well, I imagine so. Just kind of reconnecting and kind of realizing where each of you were, being in this different space, feeling disconnected is really hard after a tough experience like that. But what I also hear is that, Shane, you were not trying to be disconnected. You were trying to stay strong, but it maybe felt like disconnection.
Exactly.
And this is, I think, again, a relatively common experience when it's hard to put words to how you feel anyways. NaKaisha, you were saying you didn't even really know what you needed in that moment, and you still might not know now. It's so hard then to try and for each other to put it into words and to know where to start. But somehow you guys did, which is amazing.
Yeah. I think the other thing, Dr. Kat, that was so, I guess maybe confusing is the right word. I don't know. It's just that, in one moment I would think or feel like I need this, right? Mm-hmm. But then, when we got into that space, it's just kind of like, no, I just need to be left alone, or no, I don't feel like talking right now. But then when I'm ready to talk, maybe he's not in a space to talk. And so we had to deal with some of that, it just became about timing and, putting ourselves aside to be able to visibly see where the other person was in all of that.
Wow. I love how you described that. That's, I think, powerful. And I'm sure people who are listening can resonate with that just mismatch, so to speak, of when you're ready and what to say and all of that. That's so real. Thank you for speaking to that. I guess I'm curious a little bit just about the feelings during that time, because I'm thinking, my assumption is that feeling disconnected would make people feel sad or irritable or angry. Was there anything noticeable emotionally coming up?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Uh-oh. Maybe I shouldn't have asked that.
Yeah, I think a little bit of all of that. Just angry, upset, some arguments here and there, some attitudes, all of that, those emotions and that came up, that we had to push through and communicate through and talk through to, get to the next point of our lives and, moving forward. So, but yeah, all that was mixed in there.
He's absolutely right. I think for me, at one point, I think he had asked, well, what do you need from me? And I said, I don't need anything right now. Like, I just need to figure out what I'm doing. And it wasn't that I was excluding him, but I just remember, the doctor appointments and things like that, like the things that I needed to do, the checkups and things like that. And, I said, that's stuff that, you can be there and be a support, but I just kind of feel like I needed a minute. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when you're on a tilt-a-whirl, like an amusement park ride, and it's going around and around and round and round in circles.
Right.
And at first it's, really fun and you're like, I can handle this. And then all of a sudden you're just like, I'm feeling really dizzy and I just need this to stop.
Right.
And so when it finally stopped, it's like my head was still spinning and I needed to just stand there for a minute to kind of gain my bearing, like, where am I in all of this? And I think once I was able to actually get that for me, I could then communicate better with my husband, because it just felt like we had to go through what we needed to go through for ourselves so that we could then reconnect to say, okay, now what do we need to do together to move forward? So exactly to what, he just stated. So.
Yeah. What keeps coming up for me is like, wow, I mean, you guys are weathering this storm, but you have to have had a foundation in order to do that and come back together. And what a testament that is to you guys as a couple to be able to weather this and then come back together and like, all right, let's sit down and figure this out. And how incredibly healing that is just in and of itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think the one thing that's intertwined in this is that we only had each other. We didn't have, a lot of people around to support us in both miscarriages and both the pregnancies and both babies coming. So if we had odds with each other or were, going through, all we had was each other.
Right.
Right. So it was really not too many people that she could turn to or I can turn to. So that's where the abandonment came in, and, there's no support there. So we were all we had. And you're right that our faith was our foundation, and we had to continue to, go back to our faith and prayer and go back into this, Bible and to read and stand on that foundation to get us back on track and to mend our relationship back together. And that foundation was really important in, helping us to heal and to come together and to move forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So a month goes by and then you guys are coming back together to have this conversation. What, in terms of the process from there, you guys healing through this, maybe on kind of Cliff Notes version, what was that like? What did it look like? How did you get out of this?
Well, I'll throw kind of a twist in there. It's a funny twist.
Okay.
But it is a very life-altering twist for us that after we'd experienced this loss, I had actually scheduled with my OB to have surgery so that I would no longer be able to get pregnant just because of some complications. And that's something that we had actually talked about after I'd had, given birth to our first daughter, London. And so I was actually going to be scheduled for this surgery in December of the same year in which we'd had our second loss, which would have been 2015. And what ended up happening was my doctor had an emergency or complications with a patient. And so after about an hour and a half or so of waiting, I just decided to cancel that appointment and reschedule for a later date. And so it was like October, and we had gone on vacation for a couple of weeks. And the first week of vacation was awesome. And the second week I started getting sick, which was kind of my normal sick when I had, things going on as a woman. And so I thought it was either that or just the fact that I maybe caught something on the plane. And so we got back, to Indiana, and I called my doctor and she said, well, why don't you come in? Let's run your normal panel of things that we generally tend to do. And upon running all the tests and ultrasounds and everything, we found out that we were actually expecting.
Wow.
And it wasn't just like a new pregnancy. I was about 9 weeks to the date that I had gone in pregnant. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so obviously at that point, my anxiety went through the roof.
I'm sure. Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I pretty much cried my way to 12 weeks, just hoping and praying that this pregnancy would stick. So
yeah. Thank you for speaking to that like fear and worry that during that period of time. Oh my gosh. I know so many people experience that as well.
Yeah. So with that, obviously Germany just turned 2. The pregnancy was successful, and it didn't come without its humps and bumps and anxieties and worries and concerns every single week. But every week got us a little bit closer to our beautiful daughter. And we celebrated every Tuesday because that was our week.
Aww.
So we had like a little party every Tuesday up until we delivered, which was on a Tuesday.
What? Oh, yes. Amazing.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So that's kind of how we got there.
Let me jump in right here because she's being really modest about a couple. Both pregnancies she couldn't eat. She couldn't eat anything during both pregnancies. She couldn't keep anything down, and it was really hard on her and me it was hard on me to watch her to go through that through both pregnancies and not being able to eat what she wanted, and all she could do is drink certain things, and maybe she had one or two food items she could eat, but for the most part it was nothing.
Oh wow.
And she was a trooper through both of those pregnancies, and I was just in awe and in amazement by watching her tough through that. From a man's point of view, to see her do that, because I would have gave up if I couldn't eat. I would have been laid out on the ground somewhere.
Right.
But she pushed through both of those pregnancies like a champion, and I was just so proud and amazed by that.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing in that perspective. She was being modest. Were you diagnosed with HG?
I was diagnosed with a lot with both pregnancies. So, I guess I leave that out just because I look at the fact that I just didn't want to lose another baby. And so, what I had to go through with the sickness and, just picking and choosing kind of little things to eat here and there, it was all for the better to get my babies here.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, that's hard. Okay. So we still don't even know half of the story of your pregnancy in terms of how difficult it was.
No.
That's just a glimpse into it. Oh man. I mean, that's exhausting. I don't know all what you went through, but that sounds exhausting.
It was a lot. A lot. I remember one time, that's a little funny. I was in the kitchen preparing to cook, and I'm in there doing my Chef Boyardee thing and putting some seasoning on some food, and she smells it. And immediately she just jumps up and runs to the bathroom and I was like, oh my God. So I'm trying to put everything up I would have to sneak and eat because I didn't want to eat in front of her.
Oh, man.
I would eat before I got home. I remember I came home one time, I think a slushie or something. I came in and I forgot. And I had the slushie and I came in there and sat down and set the slushie down on the coffee table. And she looks at it and she starts crying because she couldn't drink the slushie.
I mean, I would cry too.
So, it's just all those different things I had to adjust, what I had to do for her because she had to go through what she had to go through. So,
but he's redeemed himself by buying slushies at least once
and bring them home.
That's right. I'll pay back. Oh man. Okay. Wow. Thanks for that. That's funny. Oh boy. So yeah, I mean, so you guys were able to work through that during the pregnancy too. I mean, that's a lot for you, just physically for you, NaKaisha, to deal with, and emotionally for you guys to manage, especially with another baby around to take care of. Looking back on it, you've come out of it. You're, doing better, like in terms of being able to look back on this period of time. What do you wish that partners or couples or fathers would know about this period of time? Maybe Shane, if you can share.
Well, I think the main thing would be to not be so closed and to be more open and to share your thoughts, your feelings. If you want to cry, cry. If you want to, Just open up and pour your heart out to your wife. Do it. You don't have to be, so strong and so hard that you can't show your emotions, to your spouse. And I think that's really important for the man. Mm-hmm. And it's really important for, the wife to see that husband, really cares or really has feelings and is going through it with her and feels the same way that she feels. So,
right. So you were having those feelings after the loss too, but just not sharing them with her.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow. Yeah. That's really powerful. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think the most important thing for me and just sharing with other couples is that you have to work 10 times as hard to keep those lines of communication open, even when maybe you don't feel like talking, to just maybe be okay with sitting in the silence, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. That there were days where we may just sit on the couch or, go to McDonald's or Starbucks or something like that and just sit there and nothing had to be said, but everything was said in that silence.
True. Mm.
Because sometimes we didn't have words,
right,
as to what we had been through or what we were feeling. And it was a very, very difficult phase. But I guess the encouragement is just that if you put your mind to make it through as a couple and to stay connected, that you can make it through, because we have friends that have experienced way more loss than we have, 3, 4, 5, 6, even miscarriages. And I have no idea how they have made it because, I know the second time that we went through it, my capacity was at no more. Like,
sure,
I couldn't go through that again because it is so emotionally draining and hurtful. And I don't even know the words that can even express what that's like, but you can make it through it. Even with this pregnancy just coming out, like I said, our daughters too, but there was a lot that even with that pregnancy and even after Germany was born that I still had to deal with from residual from before. And so it takes a lot of work and self-awareness. I guess that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
To know how to push through and what you need from your partner to just make it through, right? And sometimes it's just minute by minute. It's not even day by day. Sometimes it literally is just minute by minute.
Right. Oh, thank you for that. And I mean, you're talking both about having some sense of self and figuring out what you need, but then also there are these periods of time that you just don't know. And that's okay to do that together. That's what's so important about what you're saying and what you're saying too, Shane, that, just keeping the connection and being vulnerable with each other. I guess that was a word that kept coming to mind for me.
Yes.
And it's so powerful.
I think this piece about loss and miscarriage is so critical because it's so common. And the more women I talk to, the more that they're sharing that this has happened to them, but they don't talk about it because they don't think that anybody else has been through it.
And there's this silence around it. And then I think it actually makes it harder for couples to talk about it too, because we're not used to talking about difficult stuff and loss in particular.
Yeah.
And I agree with Shane too, that it's hard to open up when you're kind of told that you need to be strong and whatnot. And so that for you, Shane, the fact that you could come to that understanding is, I think, really powerful and something that a lot of other men will feel empowered by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Shane, do you have anything else you'd like to add about your experience as a father, as a husband?
I guess that just had to make sure that I was there for her and for the kids. And I think, too, part of this whole process, I thought that just being there was enough. And, and I didn't really view me opening up and showing my emotions and feelings was needed. I think my thought process was just me being there present for her was enough that she needed, but I was wrong, and I learned that being there wasn't enough, and I had to express myself and express my feelings and how I felt more. And that's what was needed most.
Wow.
That's what I learned.
Wow. That's really powerful. And it's just, I think like we already said a little bit, it's hard to know that in the moment. I mean, you kind of have to go through it to figure that out.
Yeah.
And that's a tough lesson to learn, in terms of, I mean, there's like, the strain and the challenges that puts, between the connection is you don't know what it is until after you figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
I think that transcends across the entire relationship.
Yes.
That it's, on a larger scale, the communication piece transcends across the entire relationship, even into raising, our children, and not just being present, but being present with a voice, and displaying that emotion so that our daughters grow up knowing that, there's times where daddy cries, and daddy cries because daddy's sad, or daddy cries because daddy's really happy. Mm-hmm. So that shows that anybody can express emotion and share that emotion because we're human.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Right. I mean, I think we've all been conditioned to, even women too, men more so, but women too, that feelings are a sign of weakness. But there's actually so much strength in sharing them.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
NaKaisha, anything else you'd like to add or you'd like people to know?
It's different sitting on this side of the table, meaning as the patient and the person who gets the help versus being the provider. It makes it, I don't want to say easier for me to help my clients, but I can definitely understand and empathize on a different level.
Oh, sure.
And I think that there's even healing in that when you see other women going through it, but you're able to provide resources or just encourage people to talk about it. And I guess that's why we agreed to actually sit down and share this part of our life, because a lot of people don't talk about it, and it's still very taboo, and it's never easy to talk about. But I, just think that when people are comfortable and they're ready, that they can step out and get the help or the support that they need. And that they don't have to be in that sad or alone or sheltered space alone.
Yeah. Oh, man, I really hope everyone can hear that, because that is true right there. And what you guys are doing here today, I mean, I feel incredible gratitude to you guys for sharing your story together. I think, either one of you sharing separately would be powerful, but I think together is so important because, I mean, frankly, and sorry, we're often leaving fathers out of this conversation. And we're often like isolating moms as the one who have the issue or who need the help and whatnot. But this is major stuff affecting multiple people in the family. And I really appreciate you both for coming on and sharing.
Yeah. And I want to thank my husband for just being there and being present and, just doing what he could in that space.
Yeah.
I think to your point that the world is set up to where they do cater, more to the women, and the men in a sense are kind of forgotten about, but they are impacted just as much as we are. And I know that he has been, and, I appreciate just him even coming today to speak about what we've been through here.
Yeah.
So hopefully this blesses someone or helps someone, even, from a male's perspective, to just be able to hear that different side of the coin.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again so much to both of you, Shane and NaKaisha, for sharing today. I really appreciate you both, and I know that this is helping somebody.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Dr.
Thank you.
Kat.
Thank you so much, NaKaisha and Shane. Your story brings light and healing to other couples who are navigating these really difficult waters. I'm going to bring you an additional message from NaKaisha and Shane that they really want to make sure people are understanding. And they were able to send me this note after the recording of our interview. Something that they wanted to be able to touch on with you is that people can be insensitive and unaware of a woman or a couple's difficulties with infertility, miscarriage, difficult pregnancies, labors, or deliveries, and making statements like, oh, you guys should have one more baby. You need a boy. Why are your girls so far apart in age? It's like you started all over again. And for them, this was and continues to be a struggle. And it is a struggle for many, simply because of the fact that people are unaware of what they say and how they can impact a person internally. So thank you, NaKaisha and Shane, for sending that additional message. Obviously, we could spend a lot of time talking about those types of dynamics and how difficult it makes the transition through infertility and loss and pregnancy and birth. We really don't know a person's story, and it's very easy to make assumptions or say things that may be hurtful. If you'd like to be in touch with NaKaisha, you can find her on Facebook, NaKaisha T. Banks, or on Twitter and Instagram at First Lady Giggles, and on her Facebook business page, Duo Empowerment Services. And as usual, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and join us at momandmind.com. Thank you so much for being with us. Until next time. By joining us today, you are part of the growing community of people who are aware and concerned for mothers and families during this beautiful and sometimes very difficult time of life. If you or someone you know is having a hard time, help is available. You can feel better. Please look for resources for help at momandmind.com. Together, we can support moms and families so that no one has to deal with this alone. Thank you for listening and being a part of the Mom and Mind community.